The fourth area that I wanted to talk about was the issue of civil liberties. And I have 3 amendments on civil liberties. There is something that exists called the Joint Staff Civil Disturbance Cell. And I've been on the Armed Services Committee for 7 years. I had never heard of the Joint Staff Civil Disturbance Cell until they started labeling the social media content of members of Congress as extremist. So that you know this, the DOD today funds a domestic entity that tries to dictate what content online is true or false. And just as we oppose a ministry of truth in DHS, we similarly oppose a ministry of truth in DOD. And I want to submit for the record a piece from Trimix.com that highlights a social media post from Congresswoman Green and Congresswoman Boebert.
Without objection.
Thank you. And in this report, the tweets aren't particularly grievous. Ms. Green's tweet says that she woke up laughing about what a bunch of moron Democrats are giving free time to someone for. The Democrat tyrannical government is problematic. Conservatives have no say on committees. Editorial, no doubt, but dangerous, probably not. Ms. Boebert issued a tweet talking about just criticizing Secretary Austin's extremism stand-down. A stand-down, the policy that undergirded that stand-down has subsequently been abandoned by the Department of Defense. But because Ms. Boebert offered a criticism, a DOD entity labeled her as extremist. Look, the Department of Defense does not have a constitutional mandate or the responsibility to label speech as credible or illegitimate, yet they are doing it anyway. This amendment would abolish the funding for the civil disturbance cell and would have the DOD focused on their core mission. That amendment number is 1423. The next civil liberties amendment I have is amendment number 339, and this is an amendment to require a unanimous verdict under the UCMJ. This is a very important amendment, and this amendment would have been adopted in committee on a bipartisan basis, except get this. Because the presumption of a unanimous jury verdict is that fewer people would be convicted, CBO says that my amendment would have violated PAYGO. Because more people would have been acquitted, the government wouldn't have been able to charge as many fines associated with people's conviction. So because of that tortured interpretation of PAYGO, I was unable to get this really important amendment to update the UCMJ included. Any of us wouldn't want to see ourselves, our family members, our constituents subjected to a circumstance where a 3/4 requirement rather than a unanimous verdict would create a miscarriage of justice. And so I would implore you to assist me see past the CBO's ludicrousy on that point. And the final civil liberty amendment I have is Amendment 317 relating to cannabis. I do not believe we should be testing for cannabis for people who want to join the military. We have seen cannabis policy at the federal level awry for a long time, and we should be thinking about cannabis more in terms of alcohol. And because cannabis stays in the system so much longer than other drugs, someone cannot even be a drug user with great proximity to their desire to enlist or commission and yet can deem themselves somehow ineligible to serve. We are having a recruiting crisis. Under most states in this country, people use cannabis under the color of state law, and certainly my amendment would not prohibit the Department of Defense from disallowing cannabis for people who are actually in the military, but for people who seek to be in the military, it seems like an unnecessary gate that we continue to maintain. The committee has received evidence that the areas that are specifically impaired by this policy are AI, cyber, coding, at times intel, because sometimes when people are in college or wherever, they use cannabis while goofing off, and maybe that shouldn't be a reason they shouldn't be able to express their patriotism through military service. Again, that cannabis amendment is 317.